I need you right here. I need you right here.
All right, today we're going to go over how to get that big indie sound on our chorus vocals. Let's go ahead and listen to what I'm talking about.
Here, we've come too far to lay down and just give up. It's not too late to fix what we tried to cover.
That's the part I'm talking about. This part right here. How do we get those big, luscious vocals that just kind of seem to be everywhere? Well, let's dive in. Part of the secret is that they kind of are everywhere. That's not just one vocal track that's doing that. So when we take a listen to this in whole, we have 6 different tracks that we're working with. Let's start going through these one by one and then breaking down what they sounded like originally and how we build it up into that more luscious, kind of dreamy, choral-like vocal. All right, that's where we're going to, those are the words we're going to describe it with. Luscious, choral-like. So the first vocal that we have is this really kind of heavily distorted vocal for the main hook that we're working with. That vocal is just walking through the vocal chain here that we're using. We have some EQ, some dynamic EQ using the Waves FM6. It's a dynamic multiband EQ. We're able to, that's just part of my standard vocal chain. It's doing some de-essing. It's doing some de-boxinessing. We have a light pitch correction on there. These vocals are already tuned, so I just kind of throw that on there for safety net. We've got another de-esser. We're really cranking up the mid-range here. So you can see where that's really driving a lot of that grittiness and that kind of upper mid-range. I think that was like in the 8K. Yeah, the 8K region there. Just making it kind of like a nasty sounding vocal there. We then make it even nastier with some distortion. So without distortion, and then with our Decapitator distortion. So I'm, especially on this, since we're using a lot of other vocals, I wanted this to almost be a mix of an instrument and a voice, with what we wanted it to feel like. We wanted it to be gritty and be able to punch through the rest of the lusciousness that we're crafting around it, that we're building clouds around, luscious clouds around. So what we do, I just crank the punish option. I think I started with that Punk Vox preset, and then just messed around with this and kind of narrowed in on what I wanted it to sound like and really cranked up the wetness more than I normally would for a lead vocal or anything. That gives us the grittiness. I'm then running it through 2 compressors, an 1176 and an LA2A, and doing a lot of work on both of those. So taking off that first layer and then getting any of the other peaks that go through on that second compressor in the chain. After that, I would do some additional EQing just to kind of tame back anything the compressor's doing that I didn't like. And then we have our sends. So we'll call this dry. That's the distorted version. Then we start adding some short reverb and some slap reverb, or some slap delay for width. So we're starting to get a little width in that vocal. And then add a parallel widening, which is just using the free vocal doubler. I think that's from iZotope. Adding some more width there. We're then add some depth with reverb, and both kind of depth and width with a little back and forth ping pong. So already that main vocal is now sounding much bigger. However, to make it truly big, so when we see where this sits in the mix, it's still not quite where we want it. So let's go ahead and mute all of those other ones and hear it in the mix. It's pretty good. But next up, we're going to add in some far left and right doubles with different vocal textures to build out that full sound. So the next pieces that we're adding in are just a double down the middle of our falsetto, a falsetto on the left, and a falsetto on the right, singing that same melody. So that's going to add a lot of stereo width because we have the far left and the far right. You see the hard panning there. And sometimes oh, there we go. Yeah, I'm panning those even harder. I was going to say normally I pan those even harder. And then we have one down the middle just to make it sort of that phasey effect with the main one. So together with just the middle one, we have a just straight down the middle double. Then we add our left and right. And all of these chains have our same sends on there. Just to kind of go through there so you can see the sends. After that, we're going to layer in, so again, just total with the main and the doubles. So already pretty luscious, and that's all I'm using in the earlier chorus, actually. But then to build it for that final chorus, I like to add a little bit more each chorus as it progresses. We add in our chest vocals. So here we're just singing it an octave down, same melody. And I'm also throwing a doubler effect on each of these, not necessarily for width since we are panning them all the way left and right, but I like that kind of wobbly effect that it was giving it, almost like a really quick vibrato-y sort of thing is what it comes off as. So then altogether, what we end up with is, again, that total vocal. Where we have that big, luscious indie vocal.